Hello, everyone. This is Space Café Podcast, and I am Markus. In case you're in a safe environment, not driving, not running downhill, not doing something dangerous like hiking across a ledge, why don't you close your eyes for a moment? Try to picture where you are right now. The smell, the noise, the taste, the vibration, the feel of your surroundings. What makes this place special? What makes it unique? Now imagine this place is on another celestial body, like the moon or Mars. Picture how it might be different right now. Would it smell different? Would the place feel different? And now, what would you not want to miss from the place you are in right now if you were to live on another celestial body? These are some of the thoughts that today's guest of the Space Café Podcast challenges himself professionally with. Georgi Petrov, a senior associate principal at Skidmore, Owings Merrill, and an adjunct professor at NYU and MIT, spearheads initiatives that merge structural engineering with avant-garde architectural design, aiming to create sustainable habitats for life in outer space. As we stand at the cusp of viewing our planet not as a given, but as a choice, we need to start thinking about how we want to live out there in the vastness of space. So picture this again. Your new front porch offers the best sunrise you've ever seen over the red horizon of Mars. Your windows don't just let in light, they frame those swirling galaxies as your backdrop. And your daily commute? Let's just say it might involve a spacewalk or two. But it's not all science fiction, it's the future Georgi is helping to build. And as we chat, imagine how your routines, hobbies, and even your sense of community would transform. How do you throw a dinner party when your guests are from different gravity zones? This episode is more than a conversation. It's a first step into a life where Earth is a choice and not a given. Let's dive into the art of the possible, where every one of us has a place, be it on this planet or another. By the end, who knows? You might just be planning your space housewarming party. Welcome, Georgi Petrov, to the Space Café Podcast.
Thank you for the invitation. It's very cool to speak with you.
Let's find out. I hope you can say the same things once we're done.
I'm sure.
So, Georgi, space architecture, this is what you're known for many, many great projects. So what brings you originally into that dimension?
That's a very good question. It's a long story. I'm of the generation that grew up when I was little watching Carl Sagan, and most of my thoughts about space, there's the millions of us inspired.
Of course.
But eventually when I chose a career, I ended up with architecture. I was good at drawing, and my parents are physicists, so I was good at math. And eventually I was inspired to, do both. 20 or 25 years ago, when I was starting to think about merging architecture and outer space, it was a much more alone field. There wasn't much help. So I had to kind of chart my own course through it. But these days, there's more and more people that are interested in designing for habitats for outer space. And another thing is, space architects or people trained as architects that are involved in constructing environments for outer space have been around for a while. There's some of our earliest architects were, in the early 70s. Partially the layout of the modules of the International Space Station had input by space architects. One of the seminal projects is TransHab, which was a project from NASA to do a habitat for the International Space Station. Unfortunately, it didn't fly, but it was developed quite a bit. And there were two architects, Constance Adams and Chris Kennedy, who were instrumental in the internal layout of it. And they were kind of pioneers working in the room with all of the engineers. And the final layout of the design for TransHab had a lot of influence of what the architects were suggesting how to lay it out. And that project, although it didn't fly, has inspired a lot of work recently in the last 10 years. There was a company called Bigelow that was taking up and developing it with the patents that were developed by TransHab. And now Sierra Nevada Space is taken the mantle and is testing the technology. And there's some pretty cool videos in the last year where they're actually blowing up, testing to failure. So these days, being a space architect is not so lonely of a field as it is when I started.
What projects are coming up these days? Because it seems like that space is becoming commercialized.
The interesting thing is that NASA's goal is, for example, in ESA and all the other space agencies, to do things that have not been done before, right? With the resources, and they take their time. But we've been in low Earth orbit for 50 years now, so. I think 20 years ago, NASA finally started to give the mantle of work in low Earth orbit to try to bring commercial entities to do some of the work that they've already done, and so they could concentrate on getting us back further out into the solar system. And so I think it's very exciting that we have all of these next generation space stations being developed. Some of them call themselves hotel, and I'm a little bit suspicious. But the more serious ones by Axiom and Blue Origin, some of them they're already building hardware, and I'm happy to say that both Blue Origin and Axiom have a number of people that are trained as architects on their staff. So you're a field that's getting established, and I think we've kind of proven that there's value of us, people trained as architects, to be at the table when we're designing the next generation space stations. And I think for both the Axiom and the Blue Origin ones, if they end up flying, there will be, more than just hotels. I think both of their business model is to try to be a platform for many different activities to happen. You can't just stake your ground only on, tourism and things like that. So I think in both of their business models involves more than one client.
We know a little bit, or the audience, the listeners know a little bit what the International Space Station looks like from an architectural perspective. So what's different now with new projects that you're talking about?
I think, the Axiom one is meant to first attach to the International Space Station. So it's very much in the same type of structure, International Space Station. And then if it all goes well, it will eventually detach and become its own free-floating space station. I really like the orbital reef concept by the Blue Origin, where it has a central infrastructure band. And then off of it could come up all sorts of different attachments. And so it gives the infrastructure that then would enable a lot of different technologies to happen. So and I think in the renderings, it shows a variety of different modules attached to the central spine. So I think that's a pretty cool, party, or pretty more, master plan, if you want to call it that, as the equivalent of a terrestrial city.
Are those places still zero gravity, or is gravity also something, artificial gravity, that is factored into new designs?
I think the ones that are coming up, besides these two that I've mentioned, there's 4 or 5 in various stages of realism and advancement. They're all for zero microgravity. There's been a lot of research. One of the leading space architects is called Ted Hall, who has published a lot of papers on how to deal with artificial gravity. But he's not the only one. There's a lot of people who have discussed it, but I think that's a little bit further down into the future. It's more complex yet. I'm looking forward to seeing it because one very interesting part for me is that obviously, we have a lot of data of how humans behave in one gravity, right? That's where we're involved. And we have quite a bit of data of, in the last, 70 years of how the human body behaves at zero gravity. But we have almost no data of what happens in between. We have a few days of data from people being on the moon's surface. But other than that, nothing. So on 1G, obviously, we know we can live for a long time. At 0G, we know that all sorts of bad stuff happens. But we don't know at what percentage of G. Is it a linear relationship? Is there some partial gravity, that the minimum partial gravity that obviates all of the dangerous effects of zero gravity? And that is really key if we're going to be spending a lot of time on the moon, on Mars. If you want to send people to moon or Mars, you want to know what's going to happen to them. And so is Martian gravity enough to make us be okay? Is lunar gravity okay? So the promise of a partial G space station would be to study this before we have to send people all the way to the moon or Mars. So I'm looking forward to seeing one, but I don't think anybody's planning on building one anytime soon.
Have you watched the For All Mankind series on Apple TV?
I have not.
You haven't?
No.
I was just going to ask if this is accurate to you.
They have a partial G thing there?
No, they have a city, a village on Mars, and they're walking around quite normally, like we're walking around on Earth. So I'm just wondering, is Mars gravity so similar to Earth gravity?
It's about 35%. I think it's closer to our moon's gravity, which is 1/6.
So there's no walking around.
Well, on the moon, the NASA astronauts, Apollo astronauts, devised this little hop actually as the most efficient way to move around. It wasn't walking, it wasn't running. It was kind of this double-sided hop. So that is a very interesting question because, I've designed habitats, which I think would work, but nobody knows what the exact ceiling height is, for example. Are people going to need taller ceilings because they're going to be bouncing up? I know there were, back in the NASA Apollo days, some attempts to recreate with contraptions partial gravity and test people to walk in them. But I don't know how viable data is in just everyday experiences. The other venue for testing partial gravity is this. But those give you only, 20 to 30 seconds of a particular gravity at any one time, which is not zero, but it's not enough to really test, architectural experiences.
You designed also for the moon, right? The moon habitat. So in how far is that different to our regular places on Earth that we're used to, like that cubicle we're here in, or a typical office, or where is space architecture, moon architecture different?
So the project you're referring to is a collaboration we had at my company, Skidmore, Owings Merrill, and the European Space Agency to give a vision to Jan Werner's vision of the Moon Village. And we approached it at several different levels. One is a sort of a master planning, urban planning level of how would you like to lay out your habitats if you're planning on having a growing community on the
moon. By the way, what does village mean? Is this a village?
So perfect. Excellent question. Sorry, let's back up. So around 2015 is when Jan Werner, who was then the Director General of the European Space Agency, came up with this idea of a moon village. And basically, it's trying to go back to the moon in the spirit or the paradigm of the International Space Station, where a number of different players are coming together, sharing infrastructure, and then doing different things. So in the International Space Station, there's, a common infrastructure of power, and cleaning the atmosphere and so on and so forth. And for example, the European Space Agency or the Japanese Space Agency, they both have modules at the ISS, but they didn't have to bring everything. They didn't have to build solar panels. They didn't have to build the heat rejection system, all that infrastructure was there. So Jan Werner's idea is that we should take this and go to the moon in that spirit where we have a shared infrastructure of common elements, and then different entities can go and work together on the moon, as opposed to the way we went to the moon during Apollo, which was, it's me versus you and a confrontation. And it's in the end of it, it's a branding. He branded it the Moon Village. So our mission with them was to give some architectural form of what is this Moon Village could look like. And we found a particular location on the moon in the last, 10, 15 years. It's become obvious to everybody that the South Pole is the most exciting place to be. So we found a very particular place on the South Pole, and we kind of laid out where do you want to put the habitats, where do you want to
Is it underground? Or is it
No, not a lava tube. We can touch on lava tube later, but it's on the surface. And then, we also looked at a specific habitat to give, a precedent, like what would the first habitat look like. And then we even looked at, certain details of how you put together windows and things like that. So we worked on many different scales on the South Pole, on the moon, from master planning to the individual habitat. It's on the surface because, partially because, if you go to the moon, you want to be able to experience it and not be buried. Lava tubes are interesting, but we know they exist, but they're not typically in the places we want to go. The South Pole is very interesting, both scientifically, because there's very good evidence that there's volatiles in water. And they're interesting because they've been there for billions of years. So they're kind of like a scientific record of the early solar system. They're also very interesting because they're a resource, which does not exist on other parts of the moon. There's a quote that I like to reference is that if we find concrete on the moon, we mine it for the water. It's so dry. But on the South Pole, it's still hard to get because it's very frozen. It's still not just running brooks and things like that, but it is there. And if you have, water and hopefully other organic matter, then you can, have oxygen for breathing. If you bring carbon and nitrogen, you could do organic stuff, fertilizers. So you have the material that's needed to sustain a base there. So it's both interesting scientifically and because we have the resources to actually sustain humans there.
If I were to melt ice from the South Pole, would I immediately be able to drink it? Is it potable water or does it need to be treated?
That is what we want to go and find out. We don't know. In fact, most of our evidence that there's water is sort of indirect. So that is the reason why we want to send rovers and humans to find out what it is exactly. My guess is it would have to be purified, that it's mixed in with the regolith, which is not a very nice substance. But that is why it's exciting to go and find out.
Fantastic. A podcast is the most visual medium, a lot more visual than film because it leaves space for the imagination. Now, why don't you walk us through that moon village, what it looks like on the inside? You open the front door. What does it look like? And where is it different to, again, terrestrial buildings?
Oh, okay. So the habitat that we designed in detail was the first one. And so by definition, it had to have everything in it. And so it's a vertically oriented habitat with 4 levels. On the ground level, there's the airlocks and connections to other future habitats. That's where you would probably have a workshop for mending your spacesuits and all sorts of other equipment that you need to access the surface. One level up would be a scientific lab where you would do most of the work during the day, both for science and also organizing your expedition and planning, like a command center. And then the next level up would be the private crew quarters for 4, with hygiene station and cooking station, things like that. And then on the top, we provided a sort of an experimental greenhouse where, you would be both using the plants as a psychological benefit, but also hopefully doing experiments to learn how to grow plants in the future on the moon. But like any community on Earth, once you have more than one house or enclosure, I think my vision is that you would start to specialize them. So you'd probably have one that's just for work and science, one for habitation and relaxation, probably another one for storage. If you actually look at the ISS, a large part of the volume is just storing stuff that you need. But besides these sort of, engineering and technological requirements, we also try to impose a little bit of poetry into it. So one interesting bit, for example, is that on the South Pole, the Earth is always located in the same part of the sky, right? We always see the same face of the moon from the Earth, meaning that when you're on the moon's surface, the Earth is always in the same location. It doesn't circle around. It kind of wobbles throughout the year, but you can see this beautiful blue marble kind of spinning there. And so our thinking was that, well, we should arrange the habitat in the master plan so that all of them have this view of the Earth. And not only that, whenever humans go to a new place, they drive around everywhere, they make kind of a mess. So to prevent that, we were thinking that maybe the part of the lunar surface near the habitat that is facing this beautiful view of the Earth would be kind of cordoned off as a pristine lunar park. So your habitat always has this beautiful view of the Earth, the undisturbed moon, and all of the bits that we need to make the habitat work, and all of the exploration would happen in the other direction away from the Earth. So, as architects, we try to have some idea of placemaking, right? It's not just keeping the people alive, but giving them a sense of identity. Every town on Earth has a icon that they aspire to. So I was thinking that maybe this view of the habitat through the moon to the Earth would be kind of the iconic image of the moon village. If I show you a picture of Central Park, you exactly know where, what I'm talking about and where it is or something like that. So,
exactly. What is the village made out of? So what's the building material?
So, part of the reason to go there, besides the science, is to learn how to live on the moon and practice for Mars. And one important part of having a habitat or growing a sustainable habitat on another planet is to use the resources there as much as possible. And so there's a lot of work on ISRU, what we call in situ resources utilization, trying to use the stuff that's there. And so I think I see that one main reason for going there is to learn how to use this. And so people are talking about 3D printing using regular Earth, or making building blocks and using robots to build them. So early on, it would probably be some of the more basic elements like foundations or roads would be made out of this stuff. Then another thing that you could use on the South Pole of the moon is the water. And if you have oxygen and hydrogen and you maybe bring carbon, or there's some carbon there already, you can synthesize a lot of polymers that hopefully then you could 3D print furniture and things like that. But I think it would be a long time before we stop needing stuff from Earth. So one of the biggest challenges is containing the atmospheric pressure, right? It's outside is vacuum, inside is, maybe not sea level atmosphere, but even higher up. And containing the atmospheric pressure is very hard. It's probably an order of magnitude, like 10 times more force than what we're designing the floor that we're standing on here in order to hold the atmosphere. If outside this room was vacuum, you would not be able to have these big flat walls. For example, that's why everything in space looks this rounded thing. That's not just aesthetics.
It's for the pressure.
That is to be able to contain the pressure. That's why flat windows are so small, because taking this enormous pressure and bending is almost very, very, very hard.
Very interesting.
So building pressure vessels to hold the atmosphere on the moon would probably be quite out into the future. With 3D printing, you have some good strength in the direction of the material you're laying out, but between the layers, material is still pretty weak. So I think it'd be a while till we figure out how to 3D print a pressure vessel on the moon. So inevitably, it will be a mixture of things you bring from the Earth and things you find on the moon. And things that you bring from the Earth will probably look pretty similar to what we have already, except for inflatable habitats that I mentioned, the TransHab and the new modules that Sierra Nevada is working on. Those would probably be something that we haven't seen yet. There's a kind of a demonstration one that's attached to the International Space Station right now. It's called Beam. It's by Bigelow. They kind of use it as storage, as an experiment. It's still currently up at the...
It works?
It works, yeah. Astronauts go in and out of it. I don't think they use it permanently. I've seen videos of them going in. They kind of use it as storage, which is always nice out there. But it is technology that's now flown. Yeah, so it's got a technology readiness level, TRL, that's pretty good. I think on the moon we'll see more of that.
But that would be your obvious choice, I guess, inflatables, because you can just shrink wrap it on Earth and then bring it to the moon and inflate it.
Yeah, that is the benefit. That is one of another big challenge of being an architect designed for space, is that the method of getting the habitat there has a big influence on design, right? Everything has to fit in the rocket. Yeah. And so that's the benefit of inflatables. You can package them to fit in the rocket, but then inflate and be much, much bigger and give you a lot more volume when you get there. The challenge with them is that adds more complexity, right? Than a rigid, there's an extra step in deploying it than a rigid habitat. So, we're getting there, but I think the technology is proven, and I think we'll see inflatables in outer space pretty soon, like human-rated ones.
Fantastic. What is it looking like on the inside? Because from the space station, we get the impression that astronauts like it messy, because there's no covers on the walls, and you see the wires and everything underneath. So if we compare that to Star Trek, where everything is very, very tidy and clean, so what does it look like on the inside to you as an architect?
I think it would probably end up looking quite a bit like the International Space Station, because you're so constrained on space. Like on Star Trek, they have these big corridors with nothing. It will take a while for us to get there. But as space architects, we have been working on how to make it more comfy and cozy and more inviting. I think the laboratory areas where the experiments are done would probably end up being quite cluttered as well. But then the private crew quarters, even on the ISS, the private crew quarters are a lot cleaner and a lot more organized. The key thing that architects can bring is a sense of materiality and a sense of color. Right now, the ISS, it's all plastic and metal, there's a pretty stringent requirement of what kind of material you can bring up there so you don't mess up the atmosphere. But one key thing in longer term habitation, I think, is other species. Most of our science fiction, like Star Trek or Star Wars or whatever you choose, it's always humans and their machines going out to take over the universe. You never see any other species.
Exactly.
I think in reality, both out of physical necessity and psychological necessity, it would be humans and other species, and in particular plants. Higher animals take a lot more. It would be harder. But definitely the integration of plants would be key. And that's something I've been thinking of even since my last architecture thesis 20-some years ago, is various ways to integrate plants into the insides.
Like living walls or?
Living walls or, especially in front of windows. I have this, again, poetic image that in all of the crew quarters in front of their windows should have a place to grow plants where somebody can take care of it. This if they want to, from a psychological point of view, if they want to. I know some people are scared of taking off plants because they're going to kill them and it's going to demoralize them more. But there's definitely people that love to take care of plants, and you can see it on the International Space Station. In the last few years, there've been a lot of experiments of growing various types of food, and every time they do the harvest, it's like a big celebration, and you see the smiles on their faces because it's like new smells and new tastes, and it brings a lot of joy and excitement, and they make a big event of it. The last year they harvested some peppers, and a few years ago some lettuce. So that type of thing, not just as an experiment, but more as the overall integration into the architecture. Now, talking about plants, if we're talking about really trying to close the loop as much as possible and have people long term, you would need to find a way to grow a lot of food, and it would probably be a lot more mechanized and things like that. But again, we have nice precedents here on Earth. The greenhouse at the South Pole Station is a pretty popular place. It's a small room, but they do grow for the winter over crew some fresh produce there, and it's
so that's a proof that it works.
Yeah, definitely. I can't say we've figured out exactly how to do it, but there's a lot of experiments still need to be done. But I think integration of other species into the habitat would be something that is different than ISS.
Yeah.
Right?
So how was you designed with your team the Moon Village? How was it received by ESA? So how did they react?
Oh, it was great. We got.
So you brought your little model.
Yeah. The most rewarding part was that they in their ESTEC, their big technical center in the Netherlands, they have this thing called concurrent design facility where they put together a team of experts and they evaluate their missions. It's mostly done for their scientific missions where but they put this team together and evaluated our design. So we spent about a month and a half right before the pandemic, where we had a team of about 20 or so ESA experts in radiation, in structures, in thermal performance. We had a space architect, in delivery, rockets.
They would dissect your...
Yes, and we spent a lot of time going over, and they published, because it's ESA, everything is shared publicly. So there is a pretty extensive report on our design.
So how was that for you at that moment? Are you biting nails for a month?
No, we loved it because it gave it a lot more realism and pointed out to things we would do in the future. So it was a great experience. We also, along with that, got invited to participate at the Venice Biennale 2 years ago. And we had, we were going to build a full-scale replica in an artistic version, right? Not a technical mock-up. But because of the pandemic, at the end, we couldn't quite pull it off. So we ended up participating with some scaled models and a nice video that was narrated by Jeff Hoffman, who's a former astronaut. and was an advisor on our team as well. So we spread it quite widely, the thing.
It would make a fantastic traveling exhibition to also engage the public with such concepts.
We have a version of it right now. It opened in Paris at the Cité des Sciences, which will be up for 8 or 9 years. They have a new exhibit that just opened last October. And there's a number, we are participating, but there's a number of other big architecture firms. And they have some models and exhibits and things like that. So if you're in Paris, go check it out.
Good. So what up next with the Moon Village? When will it be built to the full extent?
So that project is kind of done. We published a report with STEC, and we've published, I think, 7 or 8 technical papers out there. We're looking for the next project to do with either NASA or one of the commercial space stations, hopefully. Taking it to the next step and giving it more realism, and we're hoping to be involved coming up.
Fantastic. So what do you make of what is going on in space? Because it feels like that humans are getting ready to leave the planet. Do you think that we're in that process?
Yes, NASA is committed to sending humans next year to orbit, and then hopefully a year after that to land. They've picked the crews already for the orbiting mission. So I'm hoping that we would go there in the spirit of the Moon Village. Although there's still some inklings of competition with China this time, not with the Russians. But I'm excited for the commercial players to start taking over low Earth orbit from NASA and taking the mantle and expanding the human activities in low Earth orbit. I'm hoping to live to see humans go to Mars. It was always 20 years in the future. I think Mars might still be 20 years in the future for me, but the moon's south pole seems to be pretty exciting. The ultimate goal for me, though, is going to Mars because that is way more interesting even than the south pole of the moon for both scientific reasons and for engineering and exploration reasons. So I'm hoping one day to see people on Mars. But as a space architect, I'm pretty excited about the promise of new opportunities to design things for low Earth orbit.
Does this also play back to what we're building here on Earth? Are there any learnings from space architecture?
Excellent. Yes, that's actually what my panel here at South by Southwest the other day was about. So we had 4 space architects, and we talked how our experience in designing for space affects our practice here on Earth. And we covered several aspects. There's a lot of people, when you first talk about this, think of like spin-off technologies. And that has definitely been a benefit, but I think that's not the main reason. Like, everybody thinks of Teflon and other things. If you want a better nonstick pan, you should invest in nonstick pan technology. And but the key thing is that is really irreplaceable is the way of thinking and the way of designing. Because when you're designing for outer space, you have to account for every molecule that you put in your design, right? In outer space, the thing that really counts is weight, but weight is really a good analog to embodied carbon. And so this mentality that every design decisions you make, you have to account for it with either weight or embodied carbon. And us at SOM are, I think, quite leaders in that. We calculate the embodied carbon of each design decision that we present, whether our clients ask for it or not. We have a lot of clients that are very advanced and very sophisticated, and they want to know the embodied carbon of their buildings. We have some that don't care so much, but we have committed to doing this. So I would say in the last 5 years or so, every design decision that we present to a client, we give them, the cost and the time, but we also give them the embodied carbon. And so that they could make a more informed decision of which way they want to go.
If I wanted to go zero, so how much more of an investment would that make?
I mean, upfront, usually sometimes it costs more, but we always try to present it as the lifetime of the building. So a lot of technologies that you put to reduce the operational carbon of a building have a little bit of an upfront cost, but they pay for themselves before the building is done. So overall, they are a big benefit. But also, there's benefits in reducing the embodied carbon. And there, I'll give you one example, is that we're rethinking a lot of our finishes. So at Skidmore and Merrill, I'm actually working as a structural engineer besides a space architect, although most of my training is in architecture. And our partner, Bill Baker, who's a pretty famous structural engineer, he has this saying that an engineer should design a structure that an architect would be ashamed to cover up. And so we're taking this to heart, and we work together with the architects to shape the buildings, and sometimes, if possible, omit the finishes and make the structural system be part of the expression of the building. And so if you have to have a column there, instead of putting all this embodied carbon to put a metal panel on it with its clips and all the stuff, maybe you can work where the aesthetics of the building is just the column itself. And you're saving all of this material that you don't have to produce, you don't have to ship, you don't have to install, you don't have to package. So that's kind of one example of how these decisions are very similar to space.
Sometimes people ask the question, why do we need all this? Why do we need to go into space? Don't we have more problems on Earth to solve and blah, blah, blah. But now that you're telling me that there is a lot of benefit from research, from what you just mentioned, it's I think this is the no-brainer answer to that criticism, because if there is already understanding and a solution towards zero CO2 architecture, that's already a major benefit from what we're doing out there in space.
That's the benefit that I draw out of it, and I think it's great. I run into this question a lot, but I think it's the investment in space exploration pays for itself pretty tremendously. And as a percentage of the endeavors that humans do, space architecture, working in outer space is not that big of an investment compared to our, investment in our militaries and all sorts of other things that you could also argue, why are we doing that for? Yeah. This is the inspiration from my space architecture endeavors into my terrestrial architecture is this, the way of thinking, the way of quantitatively accounting for each of your design decisions is very important.
So what up next for you and the company? So you're waiting for the call from NASA and ESA or JAXA or whoever is building something, or SpaceX?
We are putting together some proposals. In fact, actually, right now we're working on one for NASA. NASA has this program for doing research with small businesses and universities. We're definitely involved in that. Personally, I will be the chair of the Space Architecture Technical Committee of the AIAA, which is the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. And through that, we have quite a lot of activities. For a long time, every year we've sponsored sessions at 3 big conferences. And this year in October, we're having a Space Architecture Symposium, which is a full day activities of trying to gather a lot of space architects. And another endeavor we just started is trying to put a decadal survey of space architecture, kind of inspired by the decadal surveys that our astronomer and life sciences friends do at NASA. Basically, a plan or a survey of where the state of the profession is and where are the gaps in the next 10 years and where people should be thinking and working in the next 10 years in space architecture. So,
any insights you can share?
No, we're starting to do it. I mean, one of my personal things that I'm interested in is windows. windows are very important
For the psyche.
for the psyche and for being there. There's several stories back from the Mercury days where when von Braun designed the first Mercury capsule, they didn't put a window in, and the astronauts put their foot down that there has to be a window. And there's very well documented research from all sorts of psychologists and things like that of people in extreme environments that windows are important. And I think a lot of architects and a lot of these renderings of new space stations draw all kinds of windows that are not really physically possible.
But they look good.
They look good, yeah. But, that's the whole point,
Yeah.
that we can render anything. But in space, you have to really follow the physics. And so this is something that needs more work. Is how do you design windows into habitats that are both beneficial and aesthetic, and they do their job, but they also are possible and won't crush your mass limit.
Why not use displays? High resolution displays instead of windows.
But then what's the point of going there? You can do that here, right?
Yeah, but you're on the moon and you have work to do on the moon. You have research to do on the moon. I'm just thinking out loud for the psyche. I'd be interested in finding out if I could trick my mind by substituting a window for a fancy display.
That is true. Yeah, there's
seeing exactly what's outside. So of course I want to see the same view, but it's just not a window; it's a display.
There are some architects that are working on this research. I've seen several papers of people trying to explore what exactly that would mean and how to incorporate it. So it's a pretty good idea. I would still want an actual window there too. But the benefit of the displays, though, all joking aside, is that they could be much larger than the window. And so maybe it's not an either or, but a both together.
Just imagine having a whole room as a display. You could sit outside, like your mind could sit outside the room on the surface of the moon without any walls.
The trickery part would be finding enough wall space to do it, but maybe it could do it on a sort of a movable fabric or something where you could have your storage behind it and things like that. Because as you see on the International Space Station, there's very limited wall space to leave blank.
Yeah.
If there's a lot of stuff that you don't use all the time, so maybe it's something retractable that you could reach through when you need it, but most of the time it is just a high-end display.
Or a projection.
Something. No, that's a very excellent idea. And then the benefit of that is that you could turn it off or turn it to something different.
Exactly.
And change it. And that's another interesting topic is the personalization. If you have a different crew or different people come, they might have different preferences. So,
speaking of preferences, what can we learn from an architect? What should we on Earth do to make living inside a building most comfortable?
I mean, I can talk for myself. A lot of this is personal, but I would prefer natural materials, sustainable materials, even better. Avoiding petroleum plastics and things like that. That is something that's both pleasing and calling back to our nature and pretty sustainable. And so I've tried to incorporate that into our space architecture as well. Is how could you bring different tactile experiences of natural materials out in space, but also on Earth too.
Would wood work?
I think so. It would have to be treated and it'd have to not off gas. Yeah. But I don't see why wood would not be something in limited amounts, right? Mm-hmm. The other big danger in outer space is, fires and things like that. But I think that's a problem that's solvable is having probably thin veneers of wood.
I know a team of architects from Austria, and they burnt wooden beams under extreme temperatures and compared that to the same temperatures applied to concrete beams. And the wood just kept the stability of the building and the concrete didn't. So that's very interesting that there is, of course, this understanding that wood is a dangerous building material because of fire, etc. But maybe concrete is even worse.
Well, the properties of mass timber are pretty well known, and it's a great building material because it burns, it chars, but then it retains its structural properties, and so it's very good at standing up. The problem in space, though, is that it's not really the structure of it, but the fumes that will kill you way before any structural failure. So on Earth, timber buildings are accepted by building codes. You can, build quite tall buildings these days with timber. And there have been a lot of experiments of proving that you can get 2-hour rated structural elements in timber pretty easily. But again, on Earth, you're more worried about the building not collapsing and getting everybody out. In space, anything emergency you can imagine inside is much better than getting out. Getting out will kill you. So that's a very key bit about safety and building codes. I mean, we don't have building codes in outer space, but the goal of building codes on Earth is to get everybody out of the building. The goal of
stay inside.
To stay inside. Yeah, exactly.
Are you an Earth person, or would you be ready to go into space at some point if you were?
Oh, I would love to go into space. I don't know about moving there full time, but definitely, I would be happy to go immediately.
Because I keep asking my guests if they really wanted to go into space, considering the long travel time that is required to get from A to B, to keep yourself entertained. What piece of music would you not want to miss? Well, like that one piece you would not want to miss on that journey.
Oh, what if I could take one album?
No, it's one tune, because I have a Spotify playlist for the aspiring space traveler.
Okay.
So what's the one tune?
I would say Sgt. Pepper's, the album, but if I have to choose one song out of it, let me think about that.
Sure, of course, take your time. I mean, like, you got one shot because if you hate that tune, it could backfire.
That's true.
Take your time.
There has to be one song, eh?
Unfortunately.
Maybe with a little help from my friends, I'll do that one.
Nice.
Okay.
That was unexpected. I like that tune. Beautiful tune. And this podcast is called the Space Café Podcast. It's a coffee place, so to say. Why don't you share an espresso now with me, with the audience, for the mind, something that energizes our minds. And you can pick whatever kind of topic you want to pick.
Oh, not actually describe my favorite espresso shot. Okay. Let me think about it for a second.
Sure.
I'll go one thing that, whenever I want to think of where I'd be, I've taken 2 trips to the Himalayas recently.
You have?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I know it's kind of maybe a stereotypical thing, going up in the mountains and being away from everybody, but that has been something that's been truly inspirational. I've done a couple of, with my family and my kids, treks up into valleys, one in Tibet and one in Bhutan, and that was pretty amazing. Seeing power of nature and being close to the sky, and spending days up at altitude is pretty amazing. So I encourage everybody to.
I can
do that.
I can very much relate to that because I had the opportunity to go to northern India 2 years ago to the Himalayas.
Which bit?
And there is a place called Gangotri. That's a village. That's a very holy village because the Ganga River has its origin in that region from the glacier a little upstream. And so I went to that place and to a mountain called Mount Shivling.
Mm-hmm.
And it was extremely inspirational. I'm from Austria. I know what mountains are. I'm from the Alps, but still, you're at 3,000 meters. And in that village at 3,000 meters, they grow apples. That's at 3,000.
Pretty amazing. Nice.
They grow apples. And then you're at 3,500 meters in altitude and you look up. And you see those huge and tall mountains. 7,000 meter mountains. And it's like, this is mind blowing. Yeah. And you feel very, very small in that environment.
Well, we're looking for a place to go next again. We're addicted to the Himalayas. I grew up in Sofia in Bulgaria, and we have a mountain right up above the city, and you always see it, and it's a big image of the city. But that goes up to 3,000, 2,000 something meters. So going to the Himalayas is quite a different experience. Going up, I really like Bhutan. I would recommend visiting there.
What's special?
The people are very amazing. It's got the Tibetan culture, the similar religion and customs. We loved it in Tibet, but in Tibet you can really feel the Chinese boot there. So it was a little bit bittersweet to see the level of control you can achieve now, a totalitarian regime with AI technology, surveillance technology. So in Bhutan, it felt a lot freer and a lot. It's a small country with a small population that's kind of experimenting with democracy now, but.
It's a monarchy, right?
It used to be an absolute monarchy until a few decades ago, the king kind of imposed from above that we will have democracy, and our guide was like, "Okay, if the king thinks we should have democracy, let's do it." So, but it was the spirit of the people was great, and again, the going up into the mountains beyond the road and just walking and having we had to have pack animals come with us to carry our stuff. It was very beautiful. So
how did you get your kids to tag along? Because I have two teenage daughters. They just hate hiking.
Oh well, we've been hiking with them since they were very little. They started skiing almost immediately after they started walking, but it is fun. The first time we went, my son was 9, I think, or even less, 8 or 9. And I think people are used to seeing Western tourists, but adults. It was very rare to see a Western kid. And so he was a big star. Like people would come up from all over wherever we went and would try to take their picture with him or give him stuff or hug him. And touch him. So he was like the pretty big star just by the fact of being a kid walking up to the mountains. So
what was the most memorable thing, speaking of an espresso for the mind, from those moments?
Oh, waking up in the morning and watching the sun come up on some of the Himalayan peaks and bathe them in the pink, and slowly you kind of witness the whole revolution of the spheres and the alignment of the celestial objects is pretty amazing. So that's like the early morning when you just kind of out of the peaks emerge out of darkness into the sunlight is fantastic.
So it's still nature that's winning.
Yes, definitely.
The ultimate entertainer.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Georgi, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation very much.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you, my friends, for tuning in. We still have some way to go, literally and conceptually. Space is hard, but so is life. And we hope this episode has provided you with a deeper understanding of the complexities and advancements in space habitation. Join us again at the Space Café Podcast, where we'll continue to explore the vast expanse of space and the incredible innovations that bring us closer to the cosmos. And last, consider rating this show, provided you like what we do here. But consider rating our show, give us a review or give us some stars, because this is the only currency the internet seems to accept. So any of your ratings is invaluable to us. And whatever your decision is, thank you for your loyalty. Thank you that you keep coming back to this place, to the Space Café Podcast. So long, my friends. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Cheers.